At 7:30 p.m. on December 11, 1941 in Berlin, the Reichstag assembled under artificial light. The war in Europe was already more than 2 years old. France had fallen. Britain remained isolated. The Soviet Union was 6 months into a war of annihilation. Now a new enemy was being formally acknowledged. Germany declared war on the United States. The decision sounded bold, but it rested on an older conclusion. The United States, German leaders believed, was not built for sustained continental war. It was wealthy but inefficient, large but unfocused, powerful on paper but slow to act. Its army was small. Its population was divided. Its distance from Europe imposed limits no enthusiasm could overcome. This was not a casual judgment. It was the product of years of observation. In September 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, the United States Army numbered fewer than 190,000 active-duty soldiers. Its equipment was outdated. Its tank force was negligible. Its air arm was still reorganizing under doctrines formed after the First World War. Germany, by contrast, had mobilized millions and refined combined arms warfare through years of preparation. From Berlin's perspective, power was measured in divisions ready for immediate use. By that metric, the United States barely registered. Distance reinforced this view. The Atlantic Ocean stretched nearly 3,000 miles between American factories and European battlefields. Every rifle, every shell, every vehicle would have to cross it. Even Britain, already at war, struggled to move enough tonnage. Germany had lived this problem before. In the First World War, American entry had come late, and decisive forces arrived only in the final year. German planners expected a similar pattern. Slow mobilization, delayed arrival, limited effect. This assumption quietly shaped strategic priorities. In 1939 and 1940, Germany invested overwhelmingly in land warfare. Armored divisions expanded. Tactical aviation was refined. U-boat construction increased but cautiously. The surface fleet remained small. Resources were finite, and priority went to defeating enemies that could act immediately. The United States was not one of them. By the summer of 1940, France was defeated. Britain stood alone. The strategic question narrowed. Could Britain be forced out before other powers intervened meaningfully? Germany tried air power. The Battle of Britain failed to produce collapse. Germany then turned away from the West and toward the East. The Soviet Union loomed as both threat and opportunity. On June 22, 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa. This was the largest military operation ever attempted. Over 3 million men crossed into the Soviet Union along a front stretching nearly 1,800 miles. The commitment was total. Most of Germany's combat power was now tied to a single campaign with no strategic reserve behind it. Barbarossa rested on a calculation. The Soviet state, German planners believed, would collapse within months. Its political system was brittle. Its military leadership had been purged. Its economy, though large, was inefficient and poorly coordinated. A short war in the East would eliminate Germany's last continental rival. Britain would be isolated. The United States, even if it entered the war, would arrive too late to matter. This was the first narrowing of options. Once Barbarossa began, Germany's margin for error vanished. The invasion consumed resources at an unprecedented rate. Fuel usage soared. Vehicles wore out faster than replacements could be produced. Rail lines had to be rebuilt to a different gauge as armies advanced. Horses died by the tens of thousands from exhaustion and lack of fodder. Every kilometer gained increased supply strain. While German forces advanced eastward, the United States remained officially neutral. But neutrality did not mean inactivity. In September 1940, the United States enacted the Selective Training and Service Act, the first peacetime draft in its history. The law limited service to 12 months. Politically, this reassured a reluctant public. Strategically, it created a mobilization framework that could be expanded later. Germany noticed the draft. It interpreted the time limit as hesitation. At the same time, American industry began to adjust. Aircraft orders increased sharply. Shipyards expanded. Automobile factories experimented with military production. These changes were dispersed and incremental. No single decision announced a transformation. There was no dramatic mobilization decree. From Germany's vantage point, this reinforced complacency. A democracy moved slowly. It negotiated internally. It compromised. It avoided irreversible commitments. What Germany underestimated was scale. The American economy did not retool by concentrating production into a few optimized facilities. It multiplied production across thousands of sites. It simplified designs to speed output. It accepted inefficiency in exchange for volume. German production philosophy favored precision. American production favored throughput. This difference remained abstract through 1941. American units were untested. Their equipment was new and often unreliable. Training pipelines were still forming. German intelligence reports emphasized these weaknesses. Then, in March 1941, the United States passed the Lend-Lease Act. Lend-Lease did not declare war. It did not mobilize American forces for combat. It committed American production to the long-term support of countries already fighting Germany. From Berlin this looked manageable. Shipping capacity was limited. Britain was under constant attack. Soviet ports were distant and exposed. Aid would arrive slowly if at all. This was not an irrational assessment. Convoys were lost. Arctic routes were brutal. Bottlenecks were constant. But Lend-Lease introduced a new constraint Germany did not control: cumulative output over time. Even inefficient delivery systems deliver mass if they run uninterrupted. By late 1941, Germany still believed the decisive struggle was in the East. The Soviet Union had absorbed catastrophic losses. Entire armies had been encircled and destroyed. German forces reached the outskirts of Moscow. Yet the campaign did not end. Winter arrived early and harshly. Vehicles froze. Lubricants failed. Soldiers lacked winter clothing. Supply lines stretched hundreds of miles over poor roads and damaged railways. The Soviet state did not collapse. It retreated, reorganized, and mobilized further east, beyond the reach of German bombers. Germany had committed itself to a war it could not conclude quickly. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the United States Navy had begun escorting convoys partway across the ocean. American destroyers clashed with German U-boats months before formal war. Each incident increased tension. Each step reduced diplomatic room. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. 4 days later, Germany declared war on the United States. This decision has often been portrayed as ideological or emotional. In reality, it followed an existing logic. Germany was already fighting a global war. The United States was already acting as a belligerent in all but name. Declaring war unified the Axis diplomatically and removed ambiguity. Germany also believed timing favored action. The United States was unprepared. Its army was inexperienced. Its forces were scattered between two oceans. Immediate pressure could limit its effectiveness. What Germany failed to see was that it had just locked itself into a contest of endurance. The United States did not respond with immediate battlefield success. Its early operations revealed shortcomings in leadership, coordination, and doctrine. In the Pacific, defeats came quickly. In North Africa, inexperienced American units struggled against veteran German formations. German commanders took note. Reports from the field emphasized American rigidity, poor coordination, and over-reliance on material. These observations were accurate. They were also incomplete. Every American defeat consumed resources Germany could not easily replace. Trained crews, experienced officers, specialized equipment. For the United States, losses were absorbed by an expanding system. Training programs scaled up. Doctrine evolved. Production compensated. Time began to behave differently for each side. By 1942, American shipyards were producing cargo vessels at a rate Germany had never anticipated. Liberty ships were simple, slow, and often crude. But they were built faster than U-boats could sink them. Germany had planned to strangle Britain by cutting its supply lines. Instead, shipping volume increased. This was not immediately decisive. U-boats still inflicted losses. The Atlantic remained dangerous. But the strategic equation had shifted. Germany could not sink ships faster than the United States could build them. At the same time, American aircraft production surged. Designs were frozen to simplify manufacturing. Performance mattered less than availability. Training emphasized standardization over finesse. German aircraft remained technically superior in many respects. But German production could not scale at the same rate. Skilled labor was limited. Raw materials were constrained. Bombing disrupted output. The imbalance grew quietly. By the end of 1942, Germany was fighting on multiple fronts against enemies whose combined production dwarfed its own. This reality was not yet fully visible on the battlefield. German forces still held vast territories. They still inflicted heavy losses. But the strategic position was narrowing. Germany had assumed the United States would arrive late and weak. Instead, it arrived early enough and it did not stop arriving. The consequences of that miscalculation would take years to fully unfold. By early 1943, the war had entered a different phase, though it did not yet look that way on most maps. German forces still occupied vast territories in Europe. In the east, the front stretched from the Arctic to the Caucasus. In the west, no Allied army yet stood on the continent in force. But beneath the surface, the balance was shifting in ways Germany could no longer correct. The first constraint was manpower. Germany had built its army around a core of long-service professionals and early war veterans. This force structure delivered tactical excellence, but it depended on continuity. Losses could be replaced numerically but not qualitatively. Training pipelines were long. Officer education was intensive. Experience could not be manufactured. The United States built its forces differently. It accepted inexperience as a starting condition. Training emphasized standard procedures over initiative. Units were designed to be interchangeable. Leadership was replaceable by design. This difference did not show immediately in combat effectiveness, but it mattered over time. In North Africa, American forces absorbed defeat, adjusted doctrine, and returned with improved coordination. German units that defeated them did not rotate out. They remained in place, taking casualties that could not be offset. Each engagement narrowed Germany's margin. The second constraint was fuel. German operations had always assumed short campaigns. Fuel stockpiles were sufficient for offensives measured in weeks, not years. Synthetic fuel production filled part of the gap, but it was energy-intensive and vulnerable. Romania's oil fields at Ploiești were critical. Their output could not easily be increased, only defended. As the war expanded, fuel consumption outpaced supply. Every panzer division required thousands of tons per month. Air operations multiplied demand. Transport and training competed for the same reserves. By contrast, the United States had access to vast domestic oil supplies. Fuel was not unlimited, but it was abundant enough to permit waste. American units trained with live fuel. Exercises were frequent. Vehicles moved even when movement was not strictly necessary. This disparity affected tempo. German commanders increasingly planned operations around fuel availability rather than opportunity. American commanders planned around opportunity, assuming fuel would follow. The third constraint was shipping. By mid-1943, the Battle of the Atlantic had turned decisively. Improved convoy tactics, radar, sonar, and air coverage reduced U-boat effectiveness. Losses mounted. New submarines entered service, but crews did not gain experience quickly enough. German naval leadership had hoped that incremental improvements would restore the balance. They did not. The shipping gap widened instead. American shipyards produced faster than Germany could destroy. Liberty ships were followed by Victory ships, faster and more durable. Tankers multiplied. Specialized landing craft were built in the tens of thousands. This shipping capacity did not translate immediately into battlefield dominance. It accumulated quietly in ports, depots, and staging areas. Germany could see this buildup. It could not reach it. The fourth constraint was air power. In 1942, Allied bombing had been disruptive but limited. By 1943 it became systematic. American daylight bombing combined with British night bombing created continuous pressure. Industrial centers were struck repeatedly. Repair crews worked constantly. Production continued but efficiency declined. German aircraft production increased in raw numbers under Albert Speer. But the increase masked a deeper problem. Dispersal reduced efficiency. Skilled labor was diluted. Transportation bottlenecks delayed components. More aircraft existed on paper than could be deployed effectively. Meanwhile, American aircraft production surged without dispersal. Factories expanded rather than fragmented. Output was standardized. Quality control improved with repetition. The gap was no longer theoretical. The fifth constraint was time. Germany had entered the war assuming time favored decisive action. By 1943, time favored accumulation. Every month the war continued increased Allied strength disproportionately. This asymmetry created a strategic trap. Germany could not pause. Defensive posture ceded initiative and territory. Offensive action consumed irreplaceable resources. Either choice worsened the situation. In the east, the Battle of Stalingrad ended in catastrophe. An entire German army was lost. The defeat shocked morale, but more importantly, it destroyed the illusion that the Eastern War could be stabilized cheaply. Recovering from Stalingrad required new formations, new equipment, new fuel. All were scarce. In the West, Allied preparations intensified. Amphibious exercises multiplied. Airfields expanded across Britain. Stockpiles grew. Germany responded with fortifications. Concrete replaced maneuver. The Atlantic Wall absorbed enormous resources: labor, steel, transport capacity. This investment was irreversible. Once poured, concrete could not be redeployed. It locked Germany into a defensive strategy that assumed the Allies would be delayed or defeated at the coast. That assumption narrowed options further. By 1944, the United States had solved problems Germany did not know it faced. Port congestion was mitigated through artificial harbors. Fuel distribution was addressed through pipelines laid under the channel. Logistics planning extended months ahead. These solutions were not elegant. They were massive. Germany could not mirror them. Its industrial base was under attack. Its transport network was strained. Its fuel reserves were shrinking. When Allied forces landed in Normandy in June 1944, the outcome was not decided on the beaches. The landing succeeded because of what followed: continuous reinforcement, uninterrupted supply, and sustained air dominance. Germany could contest none of these fully. Counterattacks consumed fuel and experienced units. Air response was limited by shortages and losses. Rail movement was disrupted by bombing. Each German decision after June 1944 was a choice between bad and worse. The Ardennes offensive in December 1944 was one such choice. It aimed to restore initiative and split Allied forces. It depended on speed, surprise, and captured fuel. The plan acknowledged constraints without solving them. Fuel ran out. Momentum stalled. Losses mounted. After the offensive failed, Germany no longer possessed the capacity for large-scale maneuver. Defensive lines shortened. Resources dwindled. The United States, meanwhile, continued to arrive. New divisions replaced old ones. Equipment improved incrementally. Training incorporated lessons learned. The war's end was no longer in doubt. But the reasons for that outcome were not always visible in the final months. Germany had not been overwhelmed suddenly. It had been outgrown. The United States had been harder to fight not because it avoided mistakes, but because its mistakes did not close options. Germany's did. The decisive imbalance had been established long before the final battles. By the time it was apparent, it could no longer be altered. By the spring of 1945, Germany's strategic situation had collapsed into simplicity. There were no longer choices in the meaningful sense of the word. Only reactions. American forces crossed the Rhine in March. The river that had anchored Germany's western defense for centuries failed to slow them for more than days. Pontoon bridges went up almost immediately. Engineering units worked without interruption. Supplies followed on schedule. This efficiency was not improvised. It was the visible end of years of planning, production, and accumulation that Germany had never fully grasped. In the east, the Red Army advanced relentlessly. Berlin lay exposed. Germany's remaining fuel was rationed for local defense. Airfields were abandoned for lack of aviation gasoline. Training ceased. Movement became limited to night or rail segments that still functioned. By April, Germany no longer possessed a coherent command structure capable of influencing events beyond hours or days. The war ended on May 7, 1945. The final collapse appeared sudden, but it was not abrupt. It was the logical conclusion of constraints that had been tightening since long before the United States fired its first shot in Europe. Germany had expected to fight the United States as it fought Britain in 1940, indirectly, economically, and at a distance. It believed that shipping losses, political hesitation, and military inexperience would delay American impact until Germany had resolved its continental wars. That assumption had been reasonable by the standards of earlier conflicts. What Germany failed to understand was that the United States was not merely another great power entering the war. It was a system designed to scale. American strength did not lie in early efficiency or battlefield finesse. It lay in redundancy, in depth, in the ability to absorb error without strategic collapse. Distance, which Germany assumed would protect it, instead protected American industry. German factories were within range of bombers. American factories were not. German transport networks were finite and vulnerable. American ones expanded outward from an intact core. Germany fought a war where every mistake reduced future options. The United States fought a war where mistakes triggered adjustment. This difference became decisive long before Germany recognized it. By the time German leaders understood the scale of American production, it could no longer be countered. By the time they adjusted aircraft output, trained pilots were gone. By the time they reinforced the Atlantic Wall, Allied logistics had already solved the problem of sustained landing. Germany did not lose because it underestimated American resolve. It lost because it misunderstood American structure. The United States had entered the war late by choice, not incapacity. When it entered, it did so with an economy already oriented toward expansion, not survival. That distinction shaped everything that followed. The war's end left the United States in a position no power had previously occupied. Its industrial base was intact. Its military was experienced. Its logistics network spanned oceans. Its political system emerged strengthened rather than exhausted. Germany's defeat, by contrast, left Europe shattered. Industrial capacity was destroyed. Infrastructure lay in ruins. Power vacuums emerged that would shape global politics for decades. The strategic consequences extended far beyond 1945. The United States became the central stabilizing force of the post-war order. Its assumptions about scale, logistics, and sustained production informed its military planning throughout the Cold War. Germany's miscalculation became a case study. It demonstrated that modern war is not decided solely by tactical brilliance or early momentum. It is decided by systems under pressure. By which systems can grow and which ones contract. Germany believed the United States would be slow, divided, and distant. It was wrong in ways that only became visible after it was too late to change course. By the time the United States revealed how hard it truly was to fight, Germany had already exhausted every alternative.